Hey guys, how's it going? I noticed something very interesting about the east versus west facing arrays. I just figured I'd share it with you. It's interesting. I know that obviously most people want to point these arrays directly south because you're going to get the optimized uh, exposure, going in that direction. I get that. And obviously any big arrays that I put up, they will point in the proper way, in that field that I showed you guys earlier when I decide to put something down there. And the one that's further down property also faces south. But, that being said, let's take a look at something here. Like I indicated before, 50 kilowatt hours of production today. Well, 49.3. Close enough for government work, I guess. And I'm still running off batteries. Getting close. It's going to switch over the grid in a little bit, but obviously I'm doing pretty well. The production definitely filled those batteries up pretty well today because normally I would have been back on grid, way before this. So it being, almost 2 o'clock in the morning, basically 6 more hours before the real production starts again. I won't be able to get 6 hours out of this, obviously, at 1.9 kilowatt hours, and my battery voltage currently at, just under 50 volts. At 47, it switches back. I have it switching back over. So I don't know how far that'll get me. I technically could drop it to 46. I mean, technically I could drop it to 42, but I don't want to run the risk of a big load coming on and, causing me to have some kind of an issue. And it can happen. Obviously, well pump can kick on. Coffee maker, coffee maker shouldn't really do it. But, something like a well pump and combine that with a hot water heater, anything that's going to run for, some period of time, these batteries, even though they're lithium and very strong, they do sag. And when they do sag, they cause issues. So you try not to abuse them if you can help it. I mean, what's a few more days? I'll get the bus bars, and then I'll have an additional 30 kilowatts to play with. So, this problem basically goes away. So I'll be looking at grid usage for the next, you know, day or two, this weekend and probably Monday. But by Tuesday, I should have those batteries in place, and you know, then we're talking about a different story. Anyway, going back to what I was saying. So we're going to look at production from yesterday. So obviously, this is what everybody wants to see. I mean, this is really good solar production. I mean, 6,800 watts there. Had some drop off for whatever reason, clouds, I guess. 7,005 watts. Look at that. And look when this starts, when good production starts. I mean, early. I mean, coming at 8 o'clock, you're already making almost 2 kilowatts. So that's very good. But what the interesting part I wanted really to show you is on this grid. If I can find where the hell it is. Hang on. Perhaps. I thought it was here, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, so under energy, going back one day, here's production. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this out, and we're going to drill down into this bit just so you can get an idea what I'm looking at. So I can extrapolate out the difference between the PV1 array, that's the east-facing array, and the PV2 array, which is the west-facing array. Obviously, they're differentiated between each other with these two colors, light blue, dark blue. But here's the interesting part. Obviously, during the early part of the day, 7 o'clock or so, production starts. The sun is just coming up, and it's obviously hitting those east-facing panels much harder than it does the west. Look at the differences in wattage. I mean, we're talking about almost 2 kilowatts, here, where you're only getting 655 on those west-facing patterns or, panels. Now, as we progress, you get a nexus point right here. Now, at this point in time, you almost have identical input from both sides. At this point, the sun is directly overhead. This is what we would be considering solar noon, I would imagine, where now you're getting exposure to both sides of those panels, and then they operate together, in which case you can obviously see these wattages all match up with each other for the most part. I mean, we're bringing in, this is bringing in at like 120 amps, 7,000 watts. And as the sun starts to go down for the day, the exact opposite of what happens in the morning happens in the evening. The east-facing panels suffer, whereas the west-facing panels are just, tearing it up. Isn't that amazing? That's something. I mean, the point of this is everybody wants south, and I get it. You can have south, but you can also have east and west. And with that, and these being obviously the panels that I have up on this on that barn up there, those are bifacial panels. Now, granted, they're roof mounted, so you're not going to get much in the way of ancillary light coming in as you would if they were in a ground mount situation where they could have a lot of access to ambient light coming from the other side, bouncing off the ground, that sort of thing. But even still, you can get this kind of production from east and west facing arrays. And, you just put up a south facing array in conjunction with these. I guess you could always stick that on its own charge controller. I mean, I have about 3 additional Flex Max 80s sitting around that I can just keep, adding up to. Each one of those guys will handle about 4,000 watts. So, you can put a bunch of panels on those, even though the voltage max on those are 150 volt. I mean, that still works out pretty good if you're using, let's say, 350, 370 watt panels. You can put a bunch of them together. You can get your 4,000 watts out of them. And the Flex Max 80s from Outback, those got to be the most rock solid charge controls I've ever seen. I've had the Midnight units. They're nice too, and I do like the fact that the Midnight is not proprietary, in which they let you use like third-party software to monitor them and some things like that. But I'm an Outback guy. At least I started off with Outback, and with my Radian system in my other house before I sold that, and that system was as solid as you will ever get. It was an 8,000 watt system, but I mean, you couldn't bring that thing down. You could run a dryer, a 4,500 watt dryer along with every other load. The thing's reporting 10.5, kilowatts, and it just runs and runs and runs and runs. It was incredible. had load sharing. It would grab, utility power if needed to help you along with loads. If you set those set points in and say, look, if a load is, 5,000 watts, I want you to automatically give me 3,000 from the grid, so that that load is basically only taking 2 kilowatt hours out of your system, but the grid is assisting with the other, portion of it. A lot of little things like that that made that Outback a really, really solid system. I mean, obviously, it's outdated going forward now. It'll still work just fine, but it won't have all the new bells and whistles that something like a Solarc would have. Solarc is probably the cream of the crop when it comes down to inverters. There's a reason why they cost what they cost. I mean, those inverter systems by themselves are, in the order of, $5,500 just for the bare inverter by itself. I mean, it's just crazy, even back in the day. I mean, my Outback, when they were new and fresh, they still didn't cost that much. So with Solarc, you get the ability to do a lot of monitoring. You have that uh, sensor. You have a lot of current transformers built into it that monitor all sorts of things, so that you can control how much power you get from the grid. If you get power from the grid, you can tell it to only export back what you took. You can zero things out perfectly with that unit, and the Wi-Fi interface is fantastic. Everything on it is basically just pretty much amazing. But if you're talking about the cost, you can buy two 12 kilowatt grow watt systems for the price you would pay for one of those. So it it becomes dollars and cents, really. I mean, I personally feel that 12 kilowatts should run everything you have. If it will not run under 12 kilowatts, then you basically need to start changing out equipment in your homestead or what have you. It just doesn't make any sense to have to run a load that large for any period of time. Even my dryer, at 4,200 watts or whatever it is, I find that to be just a load that I hate running. So I am looking for one of the heat pump versions of those dryers. And, if it's anything like the heat pump hot water heater that I have, that thing is fantastic. When it runs at 390 watts. And basically, it takes longer, to heat up water. But I set the temperature to 140 degrees. We have mixing valves. Nobody gets scalded, and it just works. Everybody gets their showers. My wife takes showers that are an hour and change long, and it just works great. So you pay the big money up front for it, but it's a one-time cost, and the savings that you get out of it are just, you just can't even understand. That thing runs, and on average every day it's like 2.9 kilowatt hours is all it took to heat up all your hot water in your house. So with that kind of thing, and I'm feeding, two different structures. I have a whole guest house set up that all of this stuff feeds, into it. And, there's hot water in both places. It just works. So, those are things that you need to consider. The dryer, 5,000 watts, 4,000 or 5,000 watts. It's a load you really do not want to have to run often on an inverter. They can do it, but the hit you take in battery, power, you can lose. Think about 5 kilowatts, and think about bringing in, on the average, setup at people's homes, maybe bringing in 25, 30 kilowatt hours a day. You've taken 1/6 of it just to run a dryer load. What if you have to do 3 loads? 15 kilowatts. You've now lost basically half of what you produced just to run a dryer. It's actually cheaper just to pay the money, leave the dryer on grid, and basically just pay the price it would cost you for 5 kilowatts, which is probably somewhere in the order of, what, 60 cents, 70 cents, $1 maybe, whatever it is, just pay that, and, you deal with it. When we run laundry here, you're talking about 4 to 5 loads of laundry, and basically you would kill your battery bank running that thing. It just doesn't make any sense to do that to your batteries. Pay the money, leave the dryer on grid, and everything works just fine. Washing machines don't have the same problem because they're just regular old motors, that run and spin, and no different than any particular load in your house. So that you can handle, of course, on the system. That's fine. If you want to be a maniac like me, just keep buying batteries. You can do that too, and you just account for your loads. So when you start saying to yourself, I know I need 3 loads of dryer, running, so that's 15 kilowatts. Basically, you buy you get enough extra batteries that can generate or store 15 kilowatts just for that particular load. And that's really how you size your system. Buy yourself energy monitors, watch the loads for a week, watch what they cost you as far as kilowatt consumption. You can tally up all those numbers at the end, and it will tell you exactly what you're going to need, to run those loads. And then you just, make sure you size up your system. You need enough panels that are going to fill that bank, and you need that bank to fulfill your needs from, say, 7 o'clock p.m. to 7:30, 8 o'clock the next morning. 13 hours. You need 13 hours of coverage, and you can get exact with it to the point where it will work exactly the way you want it to, but it's going to cost you money. So, know that all the money you spend on this stuff, you might think it's wasted. It's not, because at some point in time, you will need it. And, this world is not getting better. Things are getting way worse. And, I would not be surprised if, things start going offline, becoming unavailable. And, you really need to be able to provide for your family. And it's your job. So make sure you do it. Other than that, well, I was going to tell you something else, but I forgot what the hell it was. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning, so, who's thinking about that shit anyway? But anyway, this was interesting as far as how this works. I like this. I like the fact that I can get, 50 kilowatt hours out of this. This array is not that large, but those are 410 watt bifacial panels, and you don't need as many of them as you would with smaller panels. You stick them up on a garage, and you take advantage of the space. And then you want to make a primary array, a big one. You can do that. Find yourself some area that faces directly south, and put it up there. And you can never go wrong having production. Production is fantastic. I'm gonna have that Tesla truck when it actually gets released. I'm on the on the pre-order list. That truck is probably going to have 120 to 150 kilowatt hour battery in it. Maybe more. Who knows? Nobody even knows yet. But you're going to have to feed that thing, and I'll be damned if I'm paying money at one of these charging stations. So I'll have an array set up just to handle the Tesla. That's all it'll do. It will charge that car or that truck as much as it needs to. Even if I have to charge just 50 kilowatt hours a day, I'll do that. But I'll never pay a dime for gas, again, once I get this. I just won't. My wife just got a new truck, and I wish to God we would have got an electric truck, but she, wanted 3 rows, and so we got that. The Ford Explorer, it's a newer model of the Sport that I had a few years ago. Really nice truck, but again, when shit hits the fan and gas is scarce and all these kinds of things, you can have problems with this. And I just much rather have something that I can generate the power to make it go. You don't require permission from anyone. You don't require price gouging. You don't require any of that takes place. Not to mention the unrest that can happen at these gas stations if something really got kicked off. I'm not sure how many of you people have ever been in the third world or into a war zone, but you don't want to ever be witness to what can happen. And you don't want your wife going out there doing and being, party to dealing with that either. So if you can keep it, in house, guess what? Keep it in house. All right, guys. I went long on this. I just wanted to show you this, to let you know that you don't have to be discouraged if you only have east or west available. Take advantage of it. The sun shines, and it is very encompassing. So you set your panels. Look at the time. Look at how much power we're making at these times. You see this? This is 7:20 at night, and you're still bringing in power. All of this, and this is east and west. The sun sets in the west. So obviously your panels are looking dead at it as it's going down. And the ones on the east are looking dead at it as it comes up. And at this point, hell, they're both looking at it. So how can you go wrong? You know, put your south panels up, of course, make that your big primary, but do not fear utilizing these little ancillary, spaces, the sides. You can get stuff out of them. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening, and like, comment, share, and subscribe. Appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon.